aquí reunidos otra vez otro miércoles. La neta es que es algo bien tremendo alabar a Dios. Es un momento que Dios nos permite tener intimidad con Él, donde el Señor te habla, te dice cosas y bien chido. Y ahorita que estábamos en alabanza, estábamos cantando esta canción que decíamos que viniera al reino de Dios, ¿no? Queríamos ver el reino de Dios aquí con nosotros. Y pues no sé, me hacía pensar el Señor referente a eso. Y antes de nada más de pasar la palabra quería compartir un poquito de eso, porque muchas veces le pedimos eso al Señor, ¿verdad? Señor, queremos ver tu reino aquí en la tierra. Queremos ver el reino de Dios entre nosotros. Y la palabra de Dios nos describe que nos deja ver que el reino de Dios es Jesucristo, ¿verdad? Dice: el reino de Dios se ha acercado, el reino de Dios está entre ustedes. Y decía Jesucristo de sí mismo, porque Él es la manifestación del reino de Dios aquí. Él es el representante del reino de Dios entre nosotros, fue Jesucristo, ¿verdad? Entonces Jesucristo mora en el corazón de aquel que cree en Él, ¿sale? Entonces, bajo esa premisa quiere decir que si tú crees en Jesús, honestamente de tu corazón, Jesús mora en ti. ¿Qué quiere decir eso? Que esa oración que hacemos al Señor, de decir: Señor, queremos ver tu reino aquí. ¿De qué manera crees tú que se va a ver el reino entre nosotros? A través de tu vida, a través de mi vida. Así es como el reino de Dios se establece aquí, en la tierra, a través de nosotros. Pues somos el cuerpo de Jesús y nosotros hacemos reflejar el reino aquí. Dios nos usa a nosotros para que el reino de Dios se mueva entre nosotros, para que el reino de Dios se establezca aquí. El detalle es que a veces tenemos 2 ciudadanías o 3 ciudadanías, ¿no? Y esa es la cosa, ¿no? Entonces meditaba esto realmente el Señor, y te lo quería decir antes de que pasáramos a la palabra, porque es bien importante, porque le cantamos a Dios: Señor, queremos ver tu reino aquí. Y el Señor quiere que tú seas ese reino aquí. Todo lo sobrenatural y todo eso es cosa de Él. Él sabe cómo lo hace, cuándo lo hace, a través de quién lo hace y todo esto. Pero el Señor nos dice: tú eres la luz del mundo, tú eres la sal del mundo, tú eres ese instrumento, esa herramienta que Dios va a usar para que el reino de Dios se establezca aquí. ¿Sale? ¿Estamos? ¿Quién quiere ser, no? Señor, yo quiero que el reino de Dios se viva aquí a través de mi vida, a través de la vida de ustedes. ¿Sale? Entonces, pues bueno, pues ya sin tanto preámbulo, el fin pasado no estuvimos aquí el fin de semana. No sé si algunos se dieron cuenta, a lo mejor no, pero estábamos en Monterrey porque nos tocó en renovación de visa. Entonces anduvimos por allá, no teníamos con claridad cuándo íbamos a regresar. Y platicando con Héctor, me ha dicho desde la semana pasada: oye, traen un tema ahí que quisiera compartir. Y le dije: mira, si quieres prepáralo para el próximo miércoles, porque a lo mejor no estamos. Y pues gracias a Dios pudimos llegar como quiera, ya estamos aquí. Y yo sé que era voluntad de Dios de esa manera, porque de alguna forma es como, ni lo platicamos, pero ahorita que estaba pensando en la alabanza, pensé que era como una especie de continuación también del miércoles pasado. Tiene mucha relación con lo que vimos el miércoles pasado. Entonces, pues el Señor siempre acomoda las cosas de tal manera que nos quiera hablar de lo que Él quiere, ¿no? Entonces, pues vamos a pedirle a Héctor que pase, vamos a orar por él. Yo sé que es palabra de Dios lo que trae para compartirnos. Entonces, ¿todos hablan inglés o entienden inglés de menos? Aquí no vino Jorge Coronel, ¿verdad? Estamos bien. Entonces vamos a orar por Héctor para que el Señor nos hable. Señor, te damos santas gracias, Padre, por tu amor, tu misericordia. Gracias, Padre, por tu palabra, porque nos permites alabarte, bendecirte, Padre. Yo te doy gracias porque has puesto en el corazón de Héctor el deseo de compartir lo que tú le has hablado en su intimidad, Señor, en su familia, en su casa, a él en lo individual. Y te pido, Señor, que lo uses como ese instrumento que tú anhelas, Señor, que la palabra que salga de su boca sea tuya. Prepáranos a nosotros, Señor, para que seamos esas tierras fértiles para recibir esa semilla y que dé fruto conforme a tu voluntad, Señor. Te pido que le permitas el gozarse, ponle pasión en su corazón para hablar de tus cosas, Señor, que hay una pasión desmedida, Señor, que solo tú puedas controlar. Te damos gracias por ello, en nombre de Cristo Jesús, amén.
Amén. Does everybody speak Spanish? ¿Sí? ¿No? Okay, I see a no over there. Está bien. Es que I was coming over here, and for some reason I had this last minute idea that it was going to be in Spanish. And then one person came up to me and said, "Are you going to give it in English?" And another person said, "Are you going to give it in Spanish?" I'm like, what do I do now? I'm kidding. So lately at home, we've been talking about our struggles in the world. My wife and I were talking about this theme about things in the world and the struggles that we have with these things in the world. Years ago, the things that my kids engaged with, like the things that they used, seemed like no big deal for me to say, if they want to use the iPad, it's not a big deal. If they want to use iPhone, pues déjalos, right? I would say that's fine. It's not a big deal. Now, it's hard for me to not see the problems in things like iPads or iPhones. Ahorita ya no puedo verlo de otra manera. I can't see it any other way. And I think this is something that happens as your relationship grows with Christ. You see things differently. And so recently, I don't know if you guys know that I work as a designer. I work with magazines, and I get to read stories and work with photographers and writers. And so I'm working on the story, and I was reading it, and it's about this mom who's talking about her kid who's about the same age as my son, Mateo. Todos conocen a Mateo, ¿verdad? And so she was saying how in her house, all the iPads, all the iPhones, all the computers have some safeguard so the kids don't find things that they shouldn't be looking at. And she describes herself as a very cautious and careful mom, and that the father is also like he made everything locked up so that the kids wouldn't find anything. But they found one iPad missing, and the iPad was in her son's room. And when they found it, when the dad found the iPad, he looked at the history of what he had been looking at, and he realized it was porn. It was, as the lady describes in the story, she says it was hardcore porn, meaning that, and she's describing this scene, and she's saying like the husband was showing her, for the first time, and she describes it like she couldn't even look at it anymore. And in the story, she goes on to say that when she was a kid, she knew about this in a different way, but seeing what her son was looking at was totally different. And so, not only that, the father, he realized that it had been weeks of the son. Again, this is a little boy, 8 years old. See? 8 years old, who's looking at this. And so again, going back to my comment about before, I thought for my kids to look at an iPhone or iPad, not a big deal. And now I read this story, and I'm like, it's a big deal, right? But just imagine, what does exposure to this do to a little kid that age? Forget about that. What does exposure of this kind of stuff do to someone like us in a lifetime? Meaning a boy, a man who has looked at porn for a little time, a lot of time. In their life, they'll view a relationship with the opposite sex in this way, right? Their filter now is what they saw on the TV or on the iPad or whatever. So it's damaging to a lifetime of relationships, not just like in the short term. It's a lifetime. Toda una vida afectada, nada más por ver un poquito. And the problem is, we say, like parents, a lot of parents and a lot of parents say, it's not a big deal. No pasa nada que vea un poquito. Not porn, but like to use the iPhone, right? Like they give the phone to a little kid, no pasa nada, nada más está viendo caricaturas, right? No pasa nada. In our day-to-day, I think a lot of us, we have something in our lives that we say, it's not a big deal. No pasa nada. I don't know what it is for you guys, but in my house right now, Ale and I talk about this, and we got to the point where we're like, it is a big deal. Si pasa algo, we can't just let them into this. The struggles of this world, right? It's simple things that are small, simple things that start out as like a little bush, they become this big fire. I was watching a movie this weekend, and the character in the movie, a married man, he was talking about having an affair. And he's talking about the affair, and he says, well, it just started as a little something, and now it's this big problem, right? And so it's that's just the movie, but in real life, when married men in this case, have conversations with women, and they have a working relationship, a close working relationship, things happen. I don't know if you guys remember, in last year, people were criticizing the Vice President, Mike Pence, because he wouldn't have lunch or dinner with a woman by himself. I don't know if you guys remember that. And everybody in the media, everyone was saying, oh my God, what is Mike Pence going to do to this woman? Can he control himself? That's what they were saying, right? But nobody was talking about all those people that were making those criticisms. Nobody was saying that they knew someone who worked with someone who had an affair and ended up their relationship in divorce. They don't talk about those things, but they criticize this man for wanting to do something real simple and keep everything clean. But a lot of times, I think we say, no pasa nada. I'm a man, and before I knew the Lord, before I came to know the Word, I think I was in similar positions where I would, at work, I'd have lunch with someone of the opposite sex, and you start talking, and you start sharing your stories, and you start to grow close, and that's just, it happens. Luckily, nothing happened, but that's the reality. And so I didn't have that written here, but I wanted to pause on that because you guys are at a stage in your lives where getting married and having a relationship is right around the corner. For some of you, not for all of you. For some of you, you have a way to go. But if you have that idea clear in your mind, si está bien claro, no voy a platicar con alguien que está comprometido, no voy a platicar con mi jefe a solas. If that's very clear to you now, then things are going to be very simple for you as you enter a professional life. So a lot of these things that I'd seen in my life, in my 20s, I grew up in this world, so I understand these problems. I grew up, I started in my 20s working as a designer for newspapers and then magazines. And so everything that I did in my life was about the world. It was about trends. It was about stories. It was about crime. It was about sports. Everything I had to do was about this world. And so at this stage in my life, I think about what I said back then and how I acted back then and my ideas. And now I think it's laughable how I looked back then. It's funny to me now, and I'll share with you guys something that is going to make you laugh too. But working as a designer, working with artists and writers, I also had musician friends. I'm not going to knock the musicians in our worship band. This is not. There are. I bring this up because I think in my world at that time. How many of you guys are like visual artists, like art or music or design? I think there are a lot of people in here, right? So I think in that world, in my world back then, I remember hanging out with musicians, and I remember that the idea in this conversation we would have, the idea of sound, they would say how it transformed their way of thinking, and it transformed how they felt. And I remember that they would say they felt like they were connected to something more, right? I don't know if some of you musicians can relate to this feeling or to this. I've heard people talk about these things. And so one person said, would express it this way, that it was a high for them. They felt like it was some kind of high, and they didn't need drugs to feel this kind of high. That music kind of did that for them, and that was their vehicle to sort of get high. And so I remember thinking, oh, that sounds so cool, and yeah, you're right. I was like, you're right. It's right on. You know, in my mind, I like what they were saying. I believed it, and I wanted to be part of that world. I wasn't a musician, but I liked talking about those things, and I wanted to be part of that world. Again, the world, I think, it has a way of sneaking into how we think and what we do, and by the time you know it, you're acting in a different way. So there are two books that I wanted us to talk about today. A few verses in the book of Revelations. If you guys want to go to Revelations 2, chapter 2. I'll wait for you guys as you get there. But the other book, and you don't have to get there, you don't have to go there now. The other book is Ephesians. And both of these books interested me because I was originally thinking about this one verse in Romans 12:2. Don't look for Romans 12:2. I'll say it. But in Romans 12:2 it says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world." Did you guys find Revelations 2, chapter 2? Wait, no, Revelations 2, and then I'll tell you the verse in a minute. So anyway, I was thinking, this all started because I was thinking about this verse. Do not conform to the pattern of this world. What does it mean to you guys, the pattern of this world? When you think of a pattern, it's a group of shapes, one after the other, and they create a pattern, right? Like squares, triangles, circles. But in the world, a pattern is like a group of people that dress the same way. It's a group of people that think the same way. It's a group of people that act the same way, right? And so it says, don't conform to that pattern. There are groups of people in your world, in my world, that act the same way. And the Bible saying is, don't conform to that pattern. Don't engage, don't get involved. You don't have to become a part of that pattern. And so I was thinking about that, and then I started reading these verses. And at the heart of this message, what I've been experiencing and witnessing in the past few weeks is that our relationship with the world affects our relationship with the Lord. A relationship with the world affects your relationship with Jesus Christ. Your relationship with the world affects your relationship with each other. Your relationship with the world affects your relationship with the church. You know, sometimes me and my wife talk about this, and we go back and forth about certain things, and she's like, "You're exaggerating. ¿Por qué estás viendo eso así?" You know, she tells me, "Why are you looking at things like that?" You know, it's almost like everything I see now, I can't help but look at it in a way that it's a lie, or it's twisted, or it's not true. And so, well, let's go to the book of Revelations 2, verses 2 through 7. I'm going to read it from my Bible because I think my notes are real sloppy. So it says here in my version, I have, I think, the New International Version. It says, "I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked men, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and endured hardships for my name and have not grown weary. Yet I hold this against you. Now, let's think about the context. Jesus is talking to John. He's sharing this revelation, right? He's talking about the future and things to happen. So Jesus then says, I hold this against you. He's saying everything you're doing is right. I love your hard work. I love your conviction. But this I hold against you. You have forsaken your first love. Remember the height from which you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. If you do not repent, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from its place. But you have this in your favor. So Jesus says here, but you have this going for you. He says all these things, but he's like, but this I like, okay? You hate the practices of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. He who has an ear to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give the right to eat from the tree of life, which is in the paradise of God. So this verse, and I got to this verse, I don't even know how I got to this, but, well, actually I know. Mateo, one day we were reading, and I was like, well, what should we read? You know, I'd like to give him the opportunity to kind of tell me what's on his mind. And he just loves Revelations because of all the crazy images, all the things. It's kind of a different world, right? It's like you're reading a book about Narnia, or it's like fantasy. I mean, it paints all these pictures, right? And so I'm like, let's read that. Okay, that's cool. And so we're reading this, and what caught me was this people that he calls Nicolaitans. But let me go back a little bit. So first, he says, I know your deeds. I know your deeds. Yo sé lo que haces. Yo sé lo que estás haciendo. I know your deeds. How does God know our deeds? I ask myself, how does he know our deeds? And I think the question for us is, do we believe that God knows our deeds? That's a question. You got to ask yourself right now in your own mind, do I believe that God knows what I'm up to? Do I believe that God knows that when I close the door, he's going to find out? Right? I think that's an important question we have to ask ourselves as we keep reading this. There's a little boy who we both know, my son again, Mateo, and he has good deeds, and he has some bad deeds. And sometimes when I find out about the good ones, that's fine. But almost always I find out about the bad deeds. And when I find out about something that he does, the conversation always goes like this. And by this point, when I find out, it depends on the degree of what the problem is. I'm like, don't you know that the truth is always going to come to light? The conversation, and here I am talking to a little 8-year-old boy. I'm like, don't you know the truth is going to come to light? I think part of me thinks he's scared, but I want him to think about that. I want us to think about, I remember things that I did when I was a kid. I remember things that I've done, even in business, in work. I'm like, okay, if I do this, they're going to find out. So I'm not going to go this route. So I think the question for us today is, do we believe that? Do we understand that? There's a verse in John, don't look for this verse. John 3:20 says, for everyone practicing evil hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. And this is the New King James Version, so they use the word lest his deeds be exposed. So they're going to be exposed. Everything that we do in closed doors that we think no one's going to see, it's going to come to light. So moving forward in the verse, he says here, he knows your hard work and perseverance. Over the last few weeks, I was stressing out about all these projects that I had, and in my world we have these deadlines, and we have to finish. It's a hard deadline. We have to finish the project. I have to have all the photos and all the text, and we had 2 days to finish, and I was missing like 6 pages worth of photos, and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? And I sent someone an email, and I was waiting for their response, but in the meantime, I kept thinking, God, you know my deeds. You know that I'm trying hard. Here in the verse, he says, I know your hard work and your perseverance. So I kept thinking to myself, Lord, you know I'm trying. You know I don't want to fail you at church. I don't want to fail you in the things. And I don't want end my relationship with you right now just because I can't get my work done, right? I think a lot of times when we're stressed out, when we have a lot of things, we put our relationship with the Lord on pause, right? Because we have to finish these things first. And so I kept telling myself, I don't want to lose my composure at home. I don't want to fail. I want to engage with you, and I want to engage here at church. For those of you who are part of church, that are part of the ministry, I think you also go through that phase. We go through phases where like I'm on fire for the Lord, and I want to do this in worship. I want to share this word, and we go through phases, right? And so I was telling the Lord I want to keep engaged. And then after that, after I kind of said that as a prayer, those 2 days went by, and all those photos, all the things that I needed came through. Mission accomplished. I was like, the Lord knew, and He made it happen, and that was kind of that. So, in this relationship with the Lord, if we think about it in another way, think about it in terms of the relationship with your parents. A lot of you guys still live with your parents, and you have your day-to-day dealings with your parents. And so, for example, you guys tell me, talking about being honest and truthful, you guys tell me what happens when we're not truthful with our parents about whatever it is. It could be whatever it is that's going on right now in your life. But what happens when we're not truthful with our parents is there is a tense conversation, right? I mean, right? Like that, it's not comfortable. You're like, bueno, pero es que yo pensé en, that's what you start saying, right? When you're talking to you, es que yo pensé que, pues no sé, yo pensé que no pasa nada, papi, es que nadie se iba a dar cuenta que me salí de, in my time when I was in secundaria, I went to school in Mexico, the thing to do was to cut class, right? Es que me salí de clases por un día, un rato. In my time, it was like, te ibas de pinta, right? You would go and the things I did were stupid because I didn't go see anybody. I didn't do anything. I would just leave class and just wander around by myself. But I always thought no one's going to find out. No one would find out, and eventually they did. No one would find out that I would do these stupid things in school, and eventually my mom had to go to school, and it was embarrassing for her. And here's the thing. It's not that me as a parent, I'm embarrassed to come to school to talk about my kid. That's not the point. The point that I tell Mateo is like, you, me, we are an ambassador of Jesus Christ. We're ambassadors. That if you don't see your relationship with Christ that way, if you don't see that how you behave in school with your friends, if you don't see yourself as an ambassador, then I don't know. I think we have to, as they say, you have to check yourself. You have to. What are we doing then? What's the relationship about? And I have this conversation with Mateo. Look, here at the house, we're trying to teach you certain values, and we're talking about things that are real for us in our lives. It's real, right? I don't want to make a mistake because the word says this is the way to do it. But if then you're going to go and do these things at school, we're not being ambassadors. And so that the conversation with our parents, the conversation you guys have with your parents, I think is the embarrassment that your parents talk about, right? Because they say, es que me da un chorro de pena, tengo que ir a la escuela, right? That's what their parents say, right? It's not embarrassing. I'm not embarrassed to go to school for my kid. I'm not embarrassed to go to school and talk to to his teacher about what's happening. It's the ambassador thing, right? And so, I think I went off on a tangent there. So think about the relationship as with Christ the same way you have the relationship with your parents. And if you still have this relationship with your parent and there's this, si hay un choque todavía, and then what's your relationship like with the Lord? Is it real? And so I was also reading this passage with Sarah, with my daughter, and she always has like really good questions when we're reading this. She says, Daddy, what do they mean when they say my first love? Right? The passage says, you have forsaken the love you had at first. Well, you had at first, my first love. It's kind of the same thing, I thought. And so I was explaining it like this. I'm like, okay, so when there's a little kid and he gets a pencil and he has a new drawing pad, like little kids, they get excited about drawing. I don't know if you guys, even maybe when you guys were little, you remember, I love to do. There's a little boy, I don't know if his sisters are here, Gino's the kid here. And he was in my class and he was learning how to draw. He's like, enséñame, teach me how to do this. And he was excited. His mom told me, Gino went home with like a drawing, he was all into drawing. And so my point is, when Sarah was telling me, it's like that kid. We're like that kid. When we have this first encounter with Christ, it's like that kid who has this experience with drawing. It's great. Who knows how to draw? Who likes to draw? A couple of you guys, okay. When you draw, like I love it. If I can find time in the mornings or at night to draw, I like to do that. And so it's cool. I think drawing is cool. And so when you have this first encounter with the Lord, I related to that same feeling of drawing. When you draw for the first time and, mira mami, me salió. And it's so cool, right? And so I think the relationship with the Lord is just like that. And so the question is, what Jesus is saying is like, what happened? What happened to your first love? Why did you fall out? The little kid gets over drawing because the pencil wears out and the drawing pad's all messy. And after a week, he's like, the drawing pad's just sitting there, right? And so, but my question is, what happened to the word that you guys were exposed to that first time? When I know that there are many of you guys here because I've seen it, I've heard your testimonies. What happened to that word that first sank into your heart, right? Because when you first had that encounter with the Lord, there was a word, and it was like searing in your chest, right? You felt it in your heart, and then in this verse, he says, "What happened?" And so I asked myself too, because that happens, I think, in my life as a grown up. I think that happens too sometimes to me, And the only thing, and I think over the last couple of weeks, I was thinking about this way. I was like, okay, I was thinking of Moses, right? Remember Moses when he has this encounter with the Lord, his face is glowing, right? He's like on fire, I guess. And I thought, I wish, I want to feel that. And there were a couple of things that made me think of how that felt or reminded me of it. There's a song, you guys didn't sing it today, but there's a song, I think it's called Relentless Love or Reckless Love or something. It talks about going after that one, right? And the verses, I think Matthew 18. Every time I hear that song, I think we all can relate to this. Anybody, if you're here right now, this is what the song's about. And I relate it to my life is this. I remember times when I could have gone down the wrong path. Me acuerdo de veces cuando iba a hacer algo y el Señor me agarraba, vente para acá. Right? The Lord, you were about to make a mistake, you were about to get involved with something or someone, and something happens and the Lord pulls you back and he goes after you, right? It's like what the song says, going after that one lamb, going after that one sheep. There were times in my life where before I got married, I could have, I think about this one relationship now, and I'm like, thank you, Lord, that I did not go down that relationship. I saw myself after, like, the Lord revealed to me something about this person that I saw myself sitting in a bar, like, wasting my life away had I pursued that relationship. And so I thought about this, and I'm like, when I think about the Lord and what he's done in my life, he's done that. He's like, pull me out of this one. He pulled me out of this one. And I think that happens to us. And so when I remember that, I'm like, that fire, again, that I feel that fire light up in me. Because I know and I remember and I can feel the Lord doing something and having done something in my life. I think every one of you guys here has something probably like that. I remember that verse in Psalms where he says, you pull me out of the pit. Every time I read that verse, I get goosebumps because I envision problems that I've had. And he's like, you felt like you were in a pit. You felt like you were in so much trouble. And he pulled you out of the pit and put you on a rock. When I read that verse, I'm like, asu. That verse is, the fire gets ignited again, right? And so I think we ask ourselves, in the verse it says, what happened? And so I think the question is more, why did you separate yourself from the trunk? Luis was talking about this, and we were talking about this earlier. It's not that anything happened in your life differently. It's that you step away from this relationship with the Lord, and then the fire diminishes, right? That light, it's a little flickering light. It's not this burning fire. And so then secondly, our relationship with the church. I don't know if you guys even think about that, your relationship with the church. You think, well, I come to church, but what's my relationship? Like, why does it even matter? If we read back, he says, and Jesus says this with this statement, he says, you hate the practices of the Nicolaitans, which I also hate. Jesus tells us, Jesus says, which I also hate a lot. And then I asked myself, who are the Nicolaitans? Have you guys heard of those? Have you guys thought about who those people were and what they are and what they mean? So I did a little research, and in my uninformed and unscientific way, I was going online and looking up the Nicolaitans. If you guys go online and look for these themes on websites, I think you're going to run into some comments that are not very biblical, and you're going to run into some good stuff. But I guess all that to say is don't just base things that you're interested on from websites. Okay, going to the source and asking other people is probably the way to go. But in general, what I found out were the Nicolaitans were people who compromised the relationship with the Lord and the relationship with the church. They were people who started to bring into the church, what I found what it said here is idolatrous feasts, orgies, impurities. And so they brought in these things that didn't belong in the church. Okay. And so one comment that I found was really cool, and I want to read this to you guys, because I think this comment applies to us today. And I think for people that are involved more with the church, like the worship band, people that work with the little kids, this is an important message. So the guy says this, as the problem of worldly compromise. So what is that? What does worldly compromise mean again? It means that your relationship with things that you have with the world, right? That's a problem, he's saying. Is a problem with worldly compromise continues to spread in the church and promoted by some of today's most visible Christian leaders. Who's the guy talking about when he says today's most visible Christian leaders? There are people that we listen to on the radio or we watch on TV that has a ministry, and we're like, oh, that's a cool ministry. So this guy's saying, he's saying here, watch out. This thing about the Nicolaitans is true today. The Bible was talking about this in Revelations, how many years ago? Close to 2,000 years ago, right? And Revelations was 90 years after Christ, I think, when John was in the island of Patmos. And so anyway, so this what this guy's commentary is basically, this is happening today in the church. There are people bringing in things and subjects and ideas into the church today. And so, and then he goes on to say, it's vital for believers to be able to recognize the modern signs. One time I went to a church event, another church, not this church, and there was a guy, the pastor, he was preaching. And the way the pastor was preaching and the way he was dressed, like he had his white suit on and his tie and these nice shoes. And I was listening to the guy and I'm like, what does it matter about how he dressed? Like, why is he so polished? Like, he was overly dressed, I thought. The guy here says, for believers to be able to recognize the modern signs. I left that event, and I just kept thinking about the guy. Later on, I found out that this guy was a leader in a church, And then he began to have problems with his ministry, with his church, and he eventually got involved with another woman, and then he got a divorce. And he was the leader of his church. And so the guy's saying, watch out, be watchful for the signs. I think there are always signs, and I think the Lord gives us discernment, right? He gives you an eye to be able to say, okay, something's not right with this picture. So then the guy goes on to say, it's vital that believers be able to recognize modern signs that point to a rise in Nicolaitanism in the church today. So he's just saying, watch out, these things are happening today. So who are the Nicolaitans? So I wanted to dive more into who they were, but to make it short, I guess there are people who compromise their relationship with the Lord. How does this happen? How do we today compromise our relationship with the Lord? So I was sometimes at home before church or before I get ready for work, I iron my clothes, and so we have a little room where I have the ironing board, and I take my phone in there, and I'm listening to a sermon or music, and I saw on YouTube, I saw that it said, I shouldn't give the names of the pastors, but basically it said like, such and such pastor drops a bomb on someone else. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. And so it was like a 3-minute video, but it was basically these 3 pastors were talking about someone else's ministry, and the guy was saying, well, this other guy and himself had dinner. So imagine it's like a round table, and these pastors are all at an event, and they're talking. And so one of the pastors at the table is a guy who has a ministry. It's a big ministry, and he writes a lot of books, and his books sound like self-help. And so the one guy that wrote all these books, he's talking about an event, right? He's talking about something else, that he went to this dinner with Muslims and with Buddhists, and they're all talking, and he's like, well, I think actually we're all kind of similar. Like, we all kind of share the same beliefs. Like, we're all, So he's telling this other pastor, this other Christian pastor, I had dinner with these guys, and really, I don't think it's that bad. I don't think it's that bad that we can all share this, And the guy that was describing this scene, he's like, he was with his wife. He's like, his wife was just biting her tongue. She wanted to say something to this guy, and then the pastor, kind of nicely said, how can you say that it's not so bad if a Buddhist or a Muslim doesn't believe in Jesus Christ? How can you say, well, it's not so bad, we kind of share the same, you share maybe some similar values, but that's not the same as saying as you believe in Jesus Christ. The end all and be all of why we're here is because we believe in Jesus Christ. And so, again, we go back to when it's not so bad, right? We say that often, right? We say, well, I'll watch Walking Dead. That was my thing, right? I always tell you guys about watching Walking Dead in the past. I used to say, oh, it's not so bad. I'll just watch it. It's not a big deal. I don't watch it anymore, but I used to say, it's not so, my wife would not watch it. And I would say, it's not so bad. They're just like, killing each other. But after a while, for me, I couldn't stand watching it. I think I told you guys that story a lot of times already. But that idea of saying it's not so bad, it's not a big deal, always takes us down another path. Something I just remember right now saying about it's not so bad. I remember years ago, again, this is before I knew the Lord, I remember someone asked me to try a drug. And I'm like, and it was kind of hardcore, and I was like, it's not, okay, I'll try it once. Not a big deal. And I remember after trying it, it was the kind of thing where we would go out, and we were hanging out at night, and then it's like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and everybody's doing the thing, and everyone has this crazy high. I remember going home, and it's still and it's daylight at this point. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm in my bed, and I'm still awake. I'm still like wired from this thing that I took, and I felt like my heart like beating real fast. And I'm like, in my mind, I was like, this feels so good, but this is not normal. If it feels so good, it can't be right. It can't be that this feeling is eventually going to lead me down a path of making good decisions. So right there and then after that day, I'm like, I'm never going to try this stuff again. I never hung out with this person again. I never tried it again, and that was it. That was the end of the story. Because, again, it was just like something that makes you feel abnormally good and keeps you up 48 hours, 24 hours cannot be good. So take that as my advice. But again, all these things, saying it's not so bad, I'll give it a try. You're compromising your relationship, guys. You're letting something in that doesn't belong. God designed you in a specific way, and He didn't design you to make those stupid mistakes. A lot of times, we talk about this here. Luis, the pastors, we're all older, and there's value in tapping into the experiences we've had because you guys have front row seats to what's coming next in your lives. So you should take advantage and ask us these questions and things that you face. I think we're here for a reason, to share the word and to help you, guide you guys through this thing, right? So they had that conversation, and so then what I thought was after that, okay, what does worldly compromise mean to us today? What is it? How do I give it a practical spin? Like, how do I make this a little more maybe digestible, right? So the other day, my family and I, we walked out of the service, and we went to eat. And after going out, Mateo was like, Dad, I want to go to GameStop. And we were all like, we're finished eating. I'm like, I don't want to go to GameStop. What am I going to do in GameStop? So he's like, come on, but I just want to go see the games. And even my daughter, Sarah, was like, come on, Dad, yeah, I want to go. And they're not gamers, but I think Mateo likes to think he likes games because of his friends, and he wants to know. I don't know. I mean, he has a video game console at home, and they only play on the weekends, but even that's becoming kind of a problem. And so I'm like, okay, let's go. We'll just go. We'll go to GameStop. And we all walk into GameStop, the four of us, me, Alan, the kids, and there are gamers there, and they're like, I don't know, they're game nerds, right? I mean, the people that are at GameStop, they're kind of nerdy game people. And we're there in our Sunday clothes, and so we were there. I said, okay, I'm going to give them 5 minutes. And I'm looking around, I'm like, 90% of the things in there are not for us. 90% of the things that are there are not for anybody. It's like, it's all about these killing games. And then, okay, I know someone's going to say, you're exaggerating, dude. They're just games, right? That's what your friends say. That's what I think even other people I know in my family would say, estás exagerando, o sea, son juegos, no pasa nada. Tu hijo no va a matar a alguien porque está jugando, I don't know, Halo, or what's the game where I don't know what the names of the games. And so we're there, and after a few minutes, I felt this voice in my head say, you don't belong here. You don't belong here. And I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I know you guys have been in situations, maybe in the past or recently, where you've probably heard that voice and it said, you don't belong here. There's no reason you guys, again, 90% of the things I was going in there thinking, well, maybe there's a Mario Brothers or there's a Donkey Kong or Frog or one of those old games where it's just like you're jumping on things. And I thought, well, there's some of that stuff, it's not a big deal, but 90% of the stuff in there was garbage. I remember another story last year. I heard this on the radio about these two little boys who were playing a video game, and they were playing it with no supervision, right? And a lot of it has to do with context, right? If you're a kid who is a single family, live with just a parent, and you have no supervision, those things are different. And if you're a family and your parents are always on top of you and watching, then it's different, right? So the story was about these two kids were playing one of these video games. They were like the age of my son, like 8 years old. And then after playing the video game, they wanted to play some more. So one of the little boys finds a gun, his dad's gun, under the bed or in the dresser, and they start playing like they were playing in the video game. And the gun goes off, and the little boy kills his other little friend that's also 8 years old. And they're just playing games. And then again, I'm like, how does that happen? It happens because we say, no pasa nada. O sea, it's not a big deal, right? I mean, there are all kinds of issues, I think, when we think about that household and that parent and the way of parenting. There's probably other things happening in that little boy's life. And I don't want to make conclusions, but at the end of the day, they were imitating sort of what was happening in the video game. And so my question is, why do we compromise our relationships with what the world is offering? What's the trade-off? And then our relationship with each other. So if you want to go to the book of Ephesians 4, Ephesians 4:17. No, wait, is it 4 or 5? It's 4. Let me see. Yes, 4. Ephesians 4:17. Are you guys there? Ephesians 4:17. Sí, todos estamos ahí. Everybody understands Spanish, right? Oh, someone said no, right? Somebody said no? Okay, no, all right. I'll just say a little bit in Spanish and then. Cuando venía para acá, sentía que debía compartir en español. No sé por qué, pero entonces me confundí al final, pero en este libro de Efesios fue escrito porque Pablo quería hablar sobre la unidad en la iglesia. Paul wrote this book in Ephesians because he wanted to address the idea, this notion of unity in church. And maybe the side note here is, maybe for those of us that are part of the church day to day, there are always underlying issues, and something happens where everyone starts to take off on a different direction or has a different idea, and the idea of unity becomes a problem. So Paul is writing the book of Ephesians in part because he wants to address unity. So just keep that kind of in the back of your mind. So it says here, I'll just read verses 17 through 24. He says, "So I tell you this and insist on it in the Lord, that you must no longer live as Gentiles do in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to the hardening of their hearts." What does the futility of their thinking mean to you guys? I remember in my former life, those friendships that I had, the musicians, like I'm not picking on you guys in the worship band, I love you guys. But I was exposed to these friends, and one of these musician friends and I, we were talking about color. We were talking for like 3 hours about color. And specifically the color yellow. This is a deep conversation about yellow. It's crazy. It already sounds crazy. But I remember we were talking about it as if it was like a different planet. I mean, we were like, oh, that yellow, it's cool. I mean, it was like we were smoking something. We weren't. It was just this friend of mine was going on, and it was like an essay he was reading about the color yellow and its meaning, and how nobody cares about yellow and everybody loves blue. It was like this crazy stuff. I mean, that's why I was saying it's laughable. Now I think back at my life. My life before then, what the world was offering me was this kind of thing that it was seducing to me. It was seducing in a way that I thought it was something more. It was like this, es una filosofía bien padre. Está bien padre meterte, clavarte en el amarillo. O sea, come on. And so, and then I went back home and I started painting yellow circles with watercolors. Like, he's right. I was like, I mean, that's crazy. I think I still have. I was thinking of looking for some of this stuff to show you guys to prove you how crazy I was. But it says here, the futility of their thinking. Now, tell me, what sense does it make for a 24-year-old to dive into this thought process? Like, when you compare to the things that the Lord has for you, when you talk about the worship song we were singing, Tuyo es el poder, the power there is power in Scripture. There's power in His Word. And the futility, right, of the way we think and the way we used to think. Then it goes on to say, having lost all sensitivity, this is verse 19, having lost all sensitivity, they have given themselves over to sensuality so as to indulge in every kind of impurity, and they are full of greed. That, however, is not the way of life you learned. He's saying, you haven't learned this. Everyone here comes to church and you're learning something. And he's saying, that thing that the world is trying to sell you, that's not what you learned. That's what he's saying in Ephesians. That thing, that's not what I'm talking about. Getting into yellow is not what you learned. And then it goes on to say, verse 22, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires. Now, what is a deceitful desire? Can anyone, I'm going to go, I don't know if you guys ever saw this movie. It's called Philadelphia with Denzel Washington. It's an old movie. You guys probably haven't seen it. But Denzel Washington, he's a lawyer, and he says, explain it to me like I'm a 3-year-old. So what is a deceitful desire? I was asking myself that question, and then an old friend of mine helped me give a good illustration. A friend of mine last week called me, a friend from Chicago. She called me, and she sent me a text message, and she was kind of like a mentor for me. I was in my early 20s, and she was probably like 30. So I always saw her as kind of like a mother figure, as a mentor. She sent me this text, and back then when I knew her, she would refer to me as her mother. So she sent me this text, and she's like, hey, why don't you call your mom? And I knew who it was right away. I'm like, I got my phone. I'm like, well, I'm going to call her right now. And I called her right away. I'm like, hey, what's going on? And I was happy to hear from her. And again, the role she played in my life back then was a mentor. And so I was excited that she called, and we were talking. And she says, okay, I have this really cool job opportunity in Chicago. I think you're a good fit for this job. You can be the creative director of this agency. And, send me your resume, and I'll put in a good word for you. And she was thinking of how we worked before. She was thinking of that kind of dynamic. And in the conversation, I was kind of saying, well, I don't know if I live like that anymore. I mean, I think I can still work like that, but I don't know if in my mind, I was like, I don't think like that, but it was exciting to me, right? And I went home and I told Ale, guess what? Someone called me and there's a job offer in Chicago, and I think I can do this. I had no experience in what she was asking me to do, but in my mind, I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have Ricky help me with a video. I'm going to do this. I was already putting everything together, and it was deceitful desire. In my flesh, I know and I can admit that I like when people exalt my work. It happened. If you're an artist, if you're a designer, when you learn how to do these things, you live for that. Quieres que te digan, oh, no manches, se ve bien padre. You want them to pat you on the back. And so that desire, that hunger, I was like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And the relationship I had with her, she was always like pushing me to do things better. And so that woke some kind of desire in me. And so I lost my place here. I just started talking and talking. And so immediately, this opportunity came up, and I started, I was wondering, okay, this relationship, if I go forward with this job, I'm compromising. I know myself, and I know I'm going to work hard at it. I know I'm going to work hard to be a part of the company. I know I'm going to work hard hours to learn what I don't know. I'm going to compromise my relationship with the Lord. I'm going to compromise the relationship with my wife. I'm going to compromise the relationship with my kids. All these kids that we know that have problems today in the world have problems because the dad isn't there. If you si le rascas, if you dig a little deeper, you'll see that their problem was because the dad wasn't there. And if the dad was there, he wasn't participating in bringing up this child. And so I thought about this, and I'm like, if I decide to even try for this job, I'm going to compromise everything that's important to me. And so the jobs that we like become prides of life. In this verse here, in 1 John 2:15, it says, did I pass it? What time is it? Am I going long? It's 9:30, right? Okay, I'll try to wrap it up. I'll try to speed up. Okay. So in this verse, John says that the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the pride of life, it says, do not love the world or anything in it. So John's reminding us of this verse. So, I don't know if it was a deceitful desire or an honest opportunity, but everything in me felt like saying this is not the path for me. So I'm going to try to wrap it up here. A couple of weeks ago, I posted something else on WhatsApp, and I shared with you guys about my son, and they had a dance at school, and one of the little boys said, why didn't they turn off the lights at the dance? These are third graders. And the mom said that this little boy said, why didn't they turn off the lights at the dance? And I'm like, well, where did this little boy get that idea? He's a pretty smart kid. Where did he get this idea? He probably got it from watching like the Disney Channel. I've seen the Disney Channel, and they always have what's the one show with the girl? Tell me a name of one of those famous Disney shows. Somebody. Come on, Regina, I know you know. Girl Meets World, and they always have a scene where they're at the dance, and the lights are dim, and they have ponche, right? That always happens, right? And so the little boy is like, where did he get this idea from? He got it from watching a show, and he's a smart boy. How did it creep into his mind? It's because everything in the world is going to creep into your mind, whether you like it or not. That thought is going to get in there. And so that's the thing, guys, no matter how smart we think we are, right? Because we think we're smart. We always say, oh, this is not going to happen to me. No matter how smart we think we are, like that little kid, the things of this world are going to creep into our mind, and it's going to do something in our thought process. I don't know if the worship team wants to come up and help me wrap it up. And so I guess just to kind of circle back and try to end, I think the important message for us here today is we are entering critical times. I think that your generation, the next generation, is under super attack. And so you have to prepare yourself, and part of that preparation is saying, the things of this world, I don't belong here. And so, why are you here? Why are you here today? I think you're here because you're trying to figure out, estamos tratando de ver qué cosas del mundo ya no pertenecen en nuestro mundo, en nuestra vida. Cuando, si estudias un campo militar, they say it's compromised if there's a hole in the wall. They say it's compromised if one of the soldiers goes down and a gate is open. Así pasa en nuestra vida. Cuando tú bajas la guardia, comprometes tu relación con el Señor, tu relación con la iglesia, tu relación con tu familia. Entonces yo creo que la oración o el llamado para nosotros es que el Señor nos dé sabiduría. I think every one of you guys in your own space, ask the Lord for wisdom to tell you how to navigate in the world. Solomon, in the dream, asked the Lord, give me wisdom. Le pedía sabiduría para saber cómo hacerle en su vida, en su mundo. One other thing that came to mind in the worship was this image that I think was maybe a better way to paint this. In the Western movies, when they catch the bad guy, when there's an encounter and they both have guns and they say surrender, right? And the bad guy puts up his hands and the guy says drop your weapon. And he still has the weapon in his hand and he has to drop it. I think a lot of times when we come to the Lord, we still have the thing that we want in our life. Tú tienes algo en tu mano que pertenece a tu vida en el mundo y tú ahí la tienes en tu mano. Y el Señor te dice, ya, entrégalo. Y estamos acá arriba así todavía. No, Señor, no quiero. I think we have the movie is playing right before us. If you're watching the movie, you're the character. You're that guy, and you have the gun, and the Lord is saying, surrender. Drop it. Drop that thing you have in this world. Señor, yo te doy gracias por esta tarde. Te doy gracias por la vida de cada uno de estos jóvenes, Señor. Yo pido, Señor, que les des ojos, Señor, para ver esas cosas del mundo que ya no pertenecen en sus vidas. Yo te doy, Señor, pido, Señor, que les des oídos para escucharte, Señor, porque nos dices hoy, ayer nos dijiste, en el pasado nos dijiste, como dice tu palabra, el que tenga oídos para oír, que escuche. Yo pido, Señor, que abras los oídos de todos los jóvenes aquí, Señor, y que les des sabiduría, Señor, y fuerza, Señor, para resistir el mundo y cómo los quiere envolver el mundo, Señor. Y te doy gracias por cada uno de ellos y pido, Señor, en el nombre de Cristo Jesús, yo pido que tú derrames, Señor, sobre ellos tu favor, tu fuerzas, tu amor, Señor, ese poder que nos habla, Señor, que está en tu palabra, en esta relación con tu Hijo Jesucristo, Señor. Úngelo, Señor, hoy. If you feel like you have this issue, this challenging thing that's bringing you down in the world, if you feel like you have, if you want to just in your place stand up, and if you want someone to pray for you, if you have that intention to face this challenge in your life, in your place, you can raise your hand or stand up, and those of you that are around will come over to you and pray for you. This is a real, este es un problema de verdad. O sea, estas cosas del mundo son cosas que están peleando, que están luchando por tenernos complacientes en un lugar donde no estamos haciendo nada en el reino del Señor. Esas cosas en el mundo quieren anular tu relación, quieren anular tu relación con el Padre. Así como esos niños que no tienen a su padre en su vida, así te quiere ver el mundo, así te quiere ver el enemigo. Esa relación con tu Padre anulada. Si tú tienes un problema, un detalle, algo que te hace el mundo, que te llama la atención, ahí en tu lugar pide por oración, que oren por ti. Lo más padre que puedes hacer es que pidas que oren por ti. Gracias, Señor, por este mensaje, esta palabra, Señor. En nombre de Cristo Jesús, Señor, amén.
Pues ahí tenemos la palabra del Señor para nosotros. Medítala en tu intimidad con Dios. Mira, la neta es que es algo que Dios nos viene hablando ya de bastante tiempo. Es una preocupación de Dios en nuestras vidas, en nuestro grupo de jóvenes, en el entorno en el que estamos viviendo. El Señor nos está llamando. Dice la palabra: ¿qué comunión tiene la luz con las tinieblas? No hay comunión. Y dice: el que dice que está en la luz, dice, debe andar como Jesucristo. El que dice que está en luz y anda en tinieblas, dice, el tal es mentiroso. O sea, no hay manera de que podamos estar en ambas partes. Y el Señor nos ha venido diciendo y diciendo: ¿y sabes para qué? Para tu vida nada más. No es para mi vida. ¿Si yo qué? Ni soy tu papá, ni soy tu hermano, nada. Somos hermanos en Cristo nomás, y los amo. Y como ustedes se aman entre ustedes. Pero el beneficio no es para mí. El beneficio de lo que Dios está hablando aquí ni es para Héctor, es para la vida de cada uno de nosotros. Porque estás en una edad en la que Dios te está llamando a seguirlo y va a transformar tu futuro. ¿Sí? Y a lo mejor suena bien repetitivo, y lo decía Héctor ahorita y todo, pero nosotros ya pasamos por donde están ustedes y lo pasamos sin Cristo. Y chale, compadre. nadie nos dijo estas cosas a nosotros, ni a Sammy, ni a mí, ni a Héctor, estoy seguro. Entonces, de veras, no menosprecies la palabra del Señor. Olvídate, muchas veces nos concentramos tanto, yo creo que entiendas el mensaje de esto que Dios nos está hablando. Muchas veces nos concentramos tanto en las formas, en cómo queremos recibirlo, o cómo, es que si fuera de esta manera o si fuera de la otra. ¿Sabes qué? Concéntrate en el mensaje, concéntrate en lo que Cristo te quiere decir. ¿Sí me explico? Las formas, eso es lo de menos. Las formas no te van a cambiar tu interior. Lo que cambia tu interior es la palabra de Dios, es el mensaje de Jesucristo. Entonces concéntrate en eso, concéntrate en lo que Dios te quiere hablar, concéntrate, recibe. Mira, yo te digo porque a mí también me ha pasado, yo también he estado ahí. Y yo también he estado en el punto de decir, es que debía ser así o debía ser así. ¿Y sabes qué me pasaba cuando yo tenía esa actitud? No recibía nada. No recibía nada porque estaba concentrado en cómo me gustaría recibirlo y no estaba concentrándome en lo que estaba recibiendo. Te lo digo al costo, te lo paso con amor. Entonces Dios nos está hablando de estas cosas. Son cosas absolutamente prácticas, son cosas de decisiones en tu vida que tienes que tomar y son para ti nada más. Y si tú quieres darle por donde tú quieras, está bien, pero hay vasos de vinagre y hay vasos de agua, y tú sabes qué quieres tomar y vas a pasar amargos si tomas el de vinagre, y si tomas de agua es del agua viva de Dios, y tú sabes qué vas a hacer. Nadie más sabe, nadie más que tú. Ni tus papás van a tomar la decisión por ti. Aunque te digan tus papás, dale por aquí, el único que va a tomar la decisión eres tú. Entonces Dios está una y otra y otra. Yo me pregunto y digo, Señor, ¿por qué? ¿Por qué tanta insistencia en estas cosas? ¿Qué estás viendo en nosotros? ¿Será que Dios está viendo un muchacho aquí sentado, pero allá afuera está viendo a otra persona? ¿O qué está viendo Dios? Y cuando estamos hablando de que el grupo de jóvenes debe ser algo más, nos referimos a la bendición que debemos de ser afuera. A eso nos referimos, no a las formas en las que compartimos las cosas aquí. Nos referimos a que el grupo de jóvenes no se limita a venir aquí a sentarse. El grupo de jóvenes tiene que trascender a ser de bendición afuera de aquí, afuera de estas paredes. En eso debemos de estar concentrados. Debemos de estar concentrados en cómo ser afectación afuera, cómo ser de bendición afuera, no cómo nos entretenemos aquí. No en de qué manera va a ser más bonito que nos entretengamos aquí. La palabra de Dios es la palabra de Dios. Esa no hay para dónde te hagas, compadre. Esto no hay manera. Y la palabra de Dios es un espejo donde tú la ves y dices, ay, mamacita, tú te ves a ti mismo. Entonces todo esto que estamos recibiendo es para ver de qué manera tú vas a hacer bendición afuera y de qué manera tú el Señor va a tocar tu vida, a transformar tu vida. Yo no sé tú, pero mi oración al Señor es: transfórmame cada día, Señor, porque cada día trae sus propias cosas, sus propias preocupaciones, sus propias tentaciones, sus propias cosas. Y el Señor, transfórmame, ¿sí? Y la palabra de Dios nos habla que nos da hombres nuevos. Entonces esto que está hablando el Señor es un anhelo de Dios para ti y para mí de vida. Tómalo. Mi consejo para ti es: tómalo, síguelo. Y no hay nada, solamente le vas a decir a Dios: Señor, yo quiero. Con el puro simple hecho de querer, el Señor dice en su palabra que su Espíritu Santo te nutre, te da lo necesario para que tú camines en esto que nos dice. ¿Ok? Entonces, pues le damos gracias a Dios por la palabra. Quiero que lo medites. Quiero que que en tu intimidad lo escudriñes con Dios, lo desmenuces en tu cuarto. A ver, Señor, ¿qué me quisiste decir? A ver, Señor, revélame. Es que te digo, cuando Cristo llega a un lugar, lo primero que pasa es que Cristo expone lo que no está chido, ¿no? El cotorreo que no le agrada a Dios de tu vida. Es lo primero que hace, porque tú te das cuenta y dices, esto no está bien. Entonces dile a Dios, Señor, expónme, sí, expónme, sáname. El salmista David lo dice. Dice, Señor, tú límpiame, porque sé mi condición. Entonces todo lo que hablamos aquí son cosas reales que yo sé que se están viviendo, de las drogas, de la pornografía, de la sexualidad. Son cosas que Dios sabe que están ahí. Entonces tómalo, este consejo, medítalo en el Señor y sigue buscando a Dios, sigue buscando lo que Él tiene que decirte a ti en lo individual, ¿sale? Entonces vamos a darle gracias a Dios por el mensaje, por este día, y vamos a seguir buscando, vamos a seguir luchando, ¿ok? Y vamos a ser de bendición fuera de aquí, ¿sí? Que en tu vida las personas que te rodean sepan que eres discípulo de Cristo, ¿no? Que luego cuando estás afuera, que lo peor que te puede pasar, lo peor que te puede pasar es que no sepan que eres cristiano, man. Es lo peor que te puede pasar. Que si no eres cool, que si no eres lo que tú, que eso vale que eso. Lo peor que te puede pasar es que no sepan que eres discípulo de Cristo. Chale. Ok, entonces vamos a darle gracias a Dios por esta palabra. Vamos a orar. Señor, te damos tantas gracias por tu palabra, porque, Señor, es un bálsamo, Señor, es agua, Señor, que no vuelve a dar sed jamás, como dices ahí mismo en la palabra, Señor. Y yo te pido, Señor, que nos des revelación y entendimiento de lo que nos estás hablando, Señor. Que nos permita, Señor, nosotros llevarlo a nuestra vida, Señor. Que nosotros podamos caminar en estos principios, Señor. Porque tu objetivo en nuestra vida es allá afuera. Es en la vida, en las cosas que vivimos diariamente. Y yo te pido, Señor, que nos reveles a nosotros tu voluntad en cada instante, que nos llenes de tu Espíritu Santo, Padre, que es la única manera de caminar en este mundo y entender que nosotros vamos en contra de las corrientes de este mundo, que nosotros no nos camuflajeamos en el pattern, como decían ahorita, en el patrón, sino que nosotros nos distinguimos como esos luminares que tú quieres, Señor. Esa es tu visión de nosotros, es tu anhelo de nosotros. Ayúdanos a hacer eso, Señor. Ayúdanos a que nuestra meta de vida sea ser como tú, Cristo. Ayúdanos a entender cuál es tu voluntad y tu deseo en nuestra vida, para nosotros ponerlo eso como nuestro anhelo y no poner nuestros anhelos antes que los tuyos, Señor. Ayúdanos, Padre, a comprender tu voluntad, de tu palabra, de lo que es real, de lo que vale la pena, de lo que es verdadero, que es tu palabra. Es la cosa más real, la cosa más real que tienes en tu vida es la palabra de Dios, es Jesucristo. Es la cosa más real, la cosa más tangible. Te doy gracias, Señor, por eso, y te pido que nos instruyas, que nos pongas en nosotros pasión y denuedo para buscarte, seguirte, Señor, y proclamarte, Señor, en donde vivimos, en donde andamos. Bendice a cada uno de los jóvenes que está aquí, Señor, que esta palabra la lleven a sus casas, a sus trabajos, a sus escuelas, Señor, para ser de bendición a otros, Señor. Y que pongas en nosotros una necesidad, Señor, de servirte fuera de aquí. Que pongas en nosotros una necesidad, Señor, de ver que nuestra primera misión, Señor, es en nuestra casa, sometiéndonos a nuestros padres, siendo obedientes a ellos, y en nuestro trabajo, Señor, proclamando quién es Cristo en nuestra vida, en nuestra escuela, Señor. Que entendamos que esa es nuestra misión inmediata, Señor. Y pon en nuestra mente y nuestro corazón cuál es esa voluntad que tiene, ese propósito personal a cada uno de nosotros, aparte de lo que tenemos en tu palabra, Señor. Que eso es para todos, es general. Señor, te doy tantas gracias, Padre. te anhelamos, te deseamos en nuestra vida, Señor. Manifiéstate cada día más. Habla, Señor, a nuestra vida, que te podamos escuchar, Señor. Queremos ver lo sobrenatural tuyo. Permítenos tener visión de ti, Señor, visión de tu voluntad. Haz que se manifiesten los dones del Espíritu en nosotros, en este grupo de jóvenes, Señor. Que nos despiertes, que nos hagas encendernos en fuego, Señor. Que tu Espíritu Santo se haga manifiesto en dones, Señor, en cada uno de los que estamos aquí, para ser de bendición para esta iglesia y a otros. Te damos gracias por ello, y en nombre de Cristo Jesús. Amén, Señor. Amén, 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 amén. Pues muy bien, muchachos. Le damos gracias a Dios por su palabra.
Hola, buenas noches. Solo para recordarles que mañana tenemos reunión de padres, para que los inviten. Es bien importante que los acompañen, que vengan. Sí, son puros papás, su papá y su mamá. Aquí a las 7:30 mañana en la iglesia. Muchas gracias.
Así es, es la primera plática que vamos a tener. Después vamos a cotorrear con ustedes, pero ahorita lo primero va a ser con sus jefes. Entonces, por favor, es bien importante que vengan, bien importante que vengan. Mañana a las 7:30 va a estar compartiéndonos el pastor Raúl, ¿sale? Entonces, Dios los bendiga. Nos vemos, si Dios quiere, también hay unos flyers que se prepararon para Noche de Alabanza, que ya está bien cerquita, gloria a Dios por eso, para que inviten a sus compas, va a estar bien chido. Y pues bueno, que estamos ahí como quiera, pueden dirigirse con Chuy, ahí tienen los flyers. Y nos vemos este viernes. No tenemos el de jóvenes adultos, vas hasta el otro, o si es este. ¿Es este ya? Perdón, ok, a las 7:30 aquí en la iglesia Jóvenes Adultos, ok. Muy bien, estamos despedidos. Dios los bendiga, nos vemos pronto.